But it's not. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be a lot of casualties on both sides. It just makes no sense in the 21st century.
How would you compare the severity of what's happened today with recent widespread assaults on your country by the Russians?
I can talk from the personal experience. The attack started on October 10th. That's when, for the first time, there were massive coordinated attacks on downtown and also energy infrastructure. But then the worst attack, in my experience, in my view, for Kyiv was around October 25th. That's when we had the 3 days, 4 days heating, electricity, and water blackout. This attack feels in a similar way because we don't have water. It's been the entire day now without water. Most of Kyiv is out electricity and heating. Although in the building where I am currently, the electricity has been restored, and there are reports that it's being restored gradually in Kyiv. But the water is not there, and that worries me quite a bit.
And it's not just Kyiv that is being attacked in this way. I understand 76 missiles came raining in from the Russian side, of which 60 were intercepted, but that means 16 got through. How bad is the damage?
So Kyiv got 3 missiles through, and you see how bad the damage is, and we had 37 shut down. So imagine what would have happened if all of them got through. So that, and Kharkiv or Odessa or Kherson, they also have gotten hit, and specifically Kharkiv is in a tough shape.
I see your defense minister, Yuri Sak, is very concerned about the frequency of Russian attacks. It means that repairing the damage is getting harder and harder. How on earth are you able to cope with this?
On the individual level, people adjust their behavior. It sounds a little bit, mundane or normal, but it actually gets normalized. The war gets normalized. It should not, but it does. For example, my wife this morning, we just put a teapot on, we were just boiling water, and she goes, fuck, I'm like, what do you mean? She said, okay, the electricity is out before the water boiled. But we have 2 liters of boiled water in thermoses from the evening. And we have extra water for technical reasons, for flushing toilets. We have food which we can, prepare using only water. So in many ways, we are prepared. And the same is at buildings at universities. For example, where I'm at the university, we have a lot of technical water. So we're okay for several days without water. So we're getting used to it. But you're correct that it takes longer and longer to repair. And so the idea is that, listen, there is a power generator and there is a backup power generator and there's a backup power generator. And the Russians are hitting the first one, the second one, the third one. And we have to manage to restore the first one before they get to the end of the line. So it's an arms race. It is a race. They are trying to destroy the infrastructure. We're trying to repair it faster than they are destroying it.
And when the Russians can target the infrastructure of Kyiv, of Kharkiv, of Kherson with such great precision, how concerned are you that this is because they still have collaborators, people working on the inside against their own country?
Well, they have the coordinates of things, because it was old Soviet infrastructure which was built. So they have precise locations of the power stations, transformators, transmission units. And I think as we recover it, their precision will be more difficult to achieve. But you're correct. They're using all kinds of intelligence, from satellite imaging to even drones, to some people who are reporting things. And our security services, our Security Bureau of Ukraine, constantly working again, arresting people, infiltrators, finding them out. So here you also can say it's kind of a race there too, a race for intelligence.
Yeah, and I see some of your military leaders are concerned that the Russians are going to use the Christmas period to try and build up military units, build up some of the forces, something like 300,000 conscripts, mount a new attack either from Belarus or from elsewhere on the border. How worried are people in Kyiv about that this may not be waning, but actually the worst may be yet to come.
I talked to a barista at our university this morning during the attack, and he said, listen, Russians are crazy. They think they would be able to scare us. I mean, I got scared, he says, in the beginning of the war when they were close, where they were 5 miles from my house, and where they were killing people, torturing, raping, when they were committing war crimes. Now they are trying to scare us with just infrastructure strikes. And if you drive outside of Kyiv, you will see fortifications everywhere. So the military is prepared. They couldn't take us in the beginning of the war when we were not ready, when we were taken by surprise. Definitely, they won't be able to take Kyiv or any other major city now. But it's not. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be a lot of casualties on both sides. It just makes no sense in the 21st century.
And I see some Ukrainian military leaders are calling for some much more serious weaponry, including potentially cluster munitions. And Major General Andriy Kovalchuk has talked about more lethal support, including this banned munition. How acceptable would that be to you?
I think Ukraine doesn't violate any laws, and if something in this translation probably has been lost through kind of cultural gap, because Ukraine throughout the war has demonstrated its adherence to the principles of the modern warfare, to humanity, to humane treatment of the prisoners of war. But having said that, it is important that Ukraine gets stronger, more effective, and more precise weapons, because that actually is more effective, saves more lives, and stops the invasion.
What kind of impact do you think that the promised Patriot missile defense system could make if it is delivered very soon by the Americans?
It depends on how many are delivered. If it's just one, the impact, of course, will be great, but limited. The Ukrainian government or leadership will choose the most strategically important targets to protect. But of course, Ukraine needs more and better air defense. This truly is a defensive weapon, because missiles are raining on civilians daily. And air defense doesn't mean escalating the war. It means stopping people from dying.
And when it comes to the future of your country, when it comes to the level of devastation that we're seeing, how concerned are you that when this is over, your country will have been reduced to a wasteland, and that Vladimir Putin will see that as some kind of victory? He'll be able to sell to his people, okay, we couldn't take over the whole country, but we reduce it to rubble.
It is true that Russia is trying to deny us a prosperous future, economic future. It is true. But they have been doing it long before the war started. They have been buying businesses, bankrupting businesses. I used to be a minister of economy, and I visited plants, aluminum production plants, which were bought out by Russian companies and basically ran into the ground so that they don't operate. So they have been destroying our economies since the day of our independence. Yes, I am concerned that we'll have a devastated economy, but I'm very, very optimistic that finally we will get rid of Russian meddling in our internal affairs, we'll be independent, and we will be able to grow, rebuild, and become a prosperous liberal democracy.
And how far do you think you can still count on much of the Western world, as opposed to many countries in Africa, in South Asia, and in the Middle East, who have been a little bit ambivalent?
It's an uphill battle. Russia works, for example, with Global South and runs successfully propaganda narratives that somehow someone in the West denies them food. In fact, the opposite is true. When Russia blockades Ukrainian ports through using Russian ships and missiles, that's when people in Global South don't get food. And Russia has been quite successful. So it's important that the West, the democratic world, keeps talking the facts, keep telling people the truth. How concerned I am that the support will continue from the democratic world, or I'm not, because this battle is very clear. It's a little bit like the independence war for the Americans, when the British didn't understand why the Americans can win. It's the same story here. I'm sorry I brought it up. Maybe it's not an ideal example too, because we're in the 21st century. But basically, we have an invading country which wants to subdue us, and we're not going to surrender. And the rest of the world understands that, and the rest of the world will support us.
Okay, Tymofiy Mylovanov, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Times Radio.